Thanks so much, folks, for joining us. I'm Luis, and I'm happy to be here with Maria to be talking to you folks about how to build .NET applications with Visual Studio Code. Let me just jump to the next slide here. Okay, so Visual Studio Code. So if you're not familiar with it, Jeff mentioned Visual Studio, and if you're using it for development for .NET, right, you're on Windows. Visual Studio is a super powerful sort of IDE and environment for you to develop your .NET applications. Visual Studio Code is this lightweight editor that also allows you to edit code, but at the same time, it has extensions and it has a lot of really nice built-in features that you can use, like version control, debugging, and all sorts of things. And it works cross-platform. So whether you're on Linux, Mac, or Windows, you can go ahead and use Visual Studio Code. Okay, so one of the languages that you can actually or one of the ecosystems that you can build apps for inside of Visual Studio Code is .NET. So that means C# apps, F# applications. You can go ahead and build them inside of Visual Studio Code, especially if you use the extensions that are provided for you. In terms of .NET, what can you build? Where it's really the platform for building whatever it is that you want, whether it's desktop apps, web apps, ML apps. You can build whatever you want inside of Visual Studio Code. There's actually a few ways for you to get started. So if you are, again, if you're on Linux, Windows, or Mac, you can go ahead and work locally. So you can just download the application, and it's going to install and work for you locally. However, there's this other way that you can work with it, which is in the cloud. It's in the cloud. So if you go ahead and, for example, take a look at this image here, this is actually a cloud environment that I'm working inside of for Visual Studio Code. However, you might notice something a little interesting here, and this is actually a Surface Duo, right? So on one screen, I have the Visual Studio Code environment, and on the other screen, I just have my keyboard, and I'm just editing away on my files and whatever it is that I need to do inside of this cloud environment. So with that, let me sort of stop with the slides for a bit and kind of show you how you might go ahead and use this environment here. Let me switch over to the browser here. So one of the easiest ways that you can go ahead and develop apps in this cloud environment is by going over to vscode.dev, right? So you can just go point your browser to that link, and it's going to give you two options. You can either open a folder locally, or you can go ahead and open a remote repository. So that could be perhaps it's on GitHub, and you can go ahead and open that repository. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to open up the repository. And in this case, it's this .NET Conf 2021 VS Code repo. And you're going to see right away, very quickly, it's going to go ahead and pull in all of those files that are part of that repository. In this case, the one file that I have here is this hello world.fsx file. So I'm going to get to that in a little bit, what these FSX files are. For now, it's just an F# script file. You're going to notice here as well that there's a lot of things. So you have the File Explorer here where you can see all of your files. You can search through your files. You also have version control, like I mentioned earlier, right? Debugging, that actually, if you wanted to debug, you probably, at least in the VS Code.dev environment, that's not something that you have an option of doing yet. And if I wanted to run this, you also don't really have a terminal. So does that mean that you have to go ahead and get the local copy? Not quite. So one of the things that you can do is you can go ahead and launch code spaces. So you can either choose to connect to a code space, or you can create a new code space from within the command palette here. Now, in this case, I already have a code space running. So if I click on connect to code space, it's just going to launch me into this cloud environment. You're going to see now that I'm no longer in that vscode.dev environment. Now it's giving me this URL here. And that, again, it has the same files that I have here, and everything that I'm expecting to see for that repository. But you're going to see there's a few things that are a little bit different. One is you're going to see there's this notation here. So now I'm getting IntelliSense inside of this environment. You're also going to notice that there is a full-blown terminal. So I can just ls, I can top, and it's a full-blown terminal in here. So if you're looking to debug, if you're looking to test your applications inside of this environment, CodeSpaces is a really good way for you to go ahead and do that, because again, you have this cloud environment that is built for you. Now, all that is not exactly magic per se, right? There's actually this file here called dev container. We're going to see it in action a little bit later. So you can go ahead and specify a bunch of settings here in this dev container.json file And what this allows you to do is it's customize what your environment is going to look like. In this case, I just have a Docker file that's using .NET 6, right? So the latest version of .NET. And that's kind of what we're using here to build our environment, install any other applications that we might need. In this case, it's installing Node in case I might need it. If I'm doing some sort of front-end development with .NET, right? This might be helpful. And using this, I can go ahead and also basically say, these are the extensions that I want to install as part of this environment. You're going to notice here that I have the C# extension as well as Ionide, which is the F# extension that provides me with this really nice sort of syntax here telling me what the types of my values are. So those are sort of the two options that you have available to you in terms of the cloud environments. You have vscode.dev, which does allow you to edit your files, right? So you can go ahead and edit your files. But if you need a little bit more, if you need a full scale sort of environment, then perhaps CodeSpaces is a really good approach for you to work with in this case. The other really cool thing that I'll mention about dev containers is if you wanted to use them in a local environment, say you have Docker installed, you can use this dev container to launch a container and have that same sort of environment available to you locally on the desktop version of VS Code, and be able to debug and run your applications inside of this, again, specified environment that you have. It's also really good if you're onboarding new people, right? You can go ahead and just tell them, hey, just open up this repository, and they're good to go in that sense. See here, let me jump back to the slides for a little bit here. So if you want to learn more about CodeSpaces or developing .NET in other places other than Windows, make sure to check out these sessions. So now that you know sort of about the environments, let me talk to you about building applications. So there's two ways that you may be familiar with if you develop with .NET for a while. You may be familiar with the .NET CLI and the way of using the .NET SDK to either scaffold templates that are built in with the .NET CLI, or you can sort of customize and scaffold your own applications using your custom templates. But there's this other really cool way of building .NET applications that I kind of want to talk to you about, and Maria is actually going to talk to you a little bit more later. And that includes two ways. One is the FSI, and the other is notebooks. Now, let me just talk quickly about FSI and what that is, the F# Interactive. Let me see here, just jump back. So FSI is this way of using this REPL-like environment to run F# code. So if I do .NET FSI, you're going to see that it's going to launch me into this read, evaluate, print loop where I can just say numbers or do something like 1 to 10, which is going to create a list of numbers from 1 to 10. That's essentially what this is doing here. If I don't want to do that, and maybe I just want to put that all in a script and run it all at once, I can just create an FSX file and do .NET FSI and then hello world.fsx, and you're going to see that after a while, what's going to happen is this file is going to run. And actually, I'm not printing anything in this case, but essentially, it's just going to run the code that's in this script file. Now, this is really great for programming interactively. There's a lot of really nice things that I like about interactive programming. One is that you're able to sort of debug and reproduce things and see in real time what your code is doing. So it's really nice that you're getting that immediate feedback. One of the things that I will call out is, so FSI, for example, is something that you would only use with F#. And the other thing is, as you saw, this is more sort of text-based, right? So if you want to do visualizations, if you want to do all sorts of things, you can't really do that inside of FSI. So if you're looking for more visuals, if you're looking for something beyond F# for interactive programming, there's actually a really, really good option, which Maria is going to talk to you a little bit about. Let me switch over.
Thank you, Luis. So when you look at notebooks today, notebooks are a great way to learn visually. And in .NET, in Visual Studio Code today, you can do it with .NET. And I wanted to give you a tour of the interactive experiences using .NET Interactive. To get started with .NET Interactive today, all you need is Visual Studio Code and the .NET Interactive extension. So let me jump right into some slides and give you a tour of this experience. So .NET Interactive Notebooks is a multi-language notebook, and we'll explain what that means as I go through this presentation. Our goal with the multi-language notebooks was to give people an experience where they could write multiple languages in a single notebook. So when you think about notebooks today, especially in the Jupyter ecosystem, you probably think about Python and R, and you're not really thinking about .NET. So when we were building the .NET notebooks, we wanted to enable that people were able to use the best language for the job without the need for a wrapper. So let's talk about our history and how we got here. So in 2019, when we officially announced the first notebook experience that was running in Jupyter, we had C# and F# support. And then a few months later, we introduced PowerShell support with the help of the PowerShell team who were collaborated with. And later on in that year, we also introduced JavaScript and HTML. And we later introduced SQL in this year in 2021. And I'm happy to say that we are also adding Custo support as well. And if you're looking for a talk on that, please check out what's new with .NET Interactive from the Azure Data Studio team. So I'm just going to show you. Sorry.
Go back. I think it went back.
It went backwards? Okay.
It did, yeah.
Right. So in this video, this is an example of our polyglot experience. And as you're going to see as this video is playing, you'll see that we have C# in one cell, HTML in another one, and JavaScript in the next. And what we're doing is that we're carrying this variable X that we've defined in C#, and then we're passing it over to JavaScript without any wrappers at all. We can also write multiple languages in a single cell. So when you think about experiences like configuring your DevOps, when you want to use specific languages, you can do that in a notebook. And you can see they're all running in harmony without any wrappers, without any additional packages, and it just works. Another thing that we introduced in .NET Interactive Notebooks was also SQL support. Now, the cool thing about our SQL experience is that not only do you get IntelliSense for SQL, like you get select from and all the syntax languages, but you also are able to get code completions on the actual databases. So you don't even need to know what your database and your schema looks like. We actually give you IntelliSense on that. So you can quickly scaffold your database. You have support for LINQ, which is great for C# developers, which allows you to take leverages of things like entity framework, right? Which entity frameworks and SQL just go hand in hand together. And another thing that we also wanted to make sure was visualization. So JavaScript is the best language for visualization. It has a strong visualization libraries like D3.js and so many others. D3.js, Plotly, that give you this rich visualization to visualize your data. So when you look at this notebook, for example, similar to when I was passing a variable in C# from one language to the other, here I'm passing a variable in C# where we're defining a piece of data. I'm then sending it to JavaScript to actually visualize it. And you're able to get this really rich visualization, which allows you to visualize your data in a more constructive way with very limited code. You can literally copy and paste a sample that you see on D3, and then you just reference it right within this notebook.
I was going to say in terms of like the visualizations and D3, I think that that's amazing. Like a lot of times when I'm, looking at these graphs, especially the ones that people build with D3, like sometimes they're just works of art. I don't even care what the chart is telling me, what the graph is telling me. They're just works of art in themselves. So the fact that you can like do this with, data across languages, I think that's awesome.
Well, it even gets fancier with visualization. Are you ready for this, Luis?
Okay, go hit me.
Okay. Writing visualizations with JavaScript is great. But what if I don't know exactly what visualization I want? So we have this concept of low-code visualization. So in this example, for example, the sample I have up here, I have a select from all from a certain database. And it just gives me a visualization, low code, and you have this interactive experience where I can specify the visualization that I need. Do I want a graph? Do I want a tree graph? Do I want a table view? You can also filter from it. And this is all using the Interact Data Explorer. But this isn't the only visualization experience that we support that is low code. In addition to that, we also have low-code visualization using Sundance. So in this sample, I am training a model for the housing price. You probably know this sample pretty well, Luis.
Yep.
Machine learning. And I'm sharing this variable across these different languages. Now, the first thing that you're going to see is that we have a natural table display. So you'll see like automatically we have formatters that say, hey, this is a list, let me display it in a list. Then I'm saying, let me explore this list a little bit more detailed. And using the Sundance visualization support that we have at Microsoft, I get something as rich as this. I'm able to like create these fancy high scale visualizations. Didn't have to write a single line of code. All I had to do was pick the visualization of my choice.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, like, can you just show me the code where you did this? But you just said like you wrote very little to no code to get this going.
Yeah. And if you do want to write your code and you want to be more flexible with the JavaScript libraries that you like and you love, we support that as well.
Awesome. This is very cool.
And to learn more about things that are happening around notebooks and machine learning and how you can get started in VS Code, check out what's new in .NET Interactive Notebooks. There's also an ML.NET Machine Learning for Data to Production in less than 30 minutes and Machine Learning for Data.NET developers. And yeah, I'll hand it back over to you, Luis.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, actually, this exact same question just came up. We had our ML.NET in 30 minutes session a couple hours ago with Bree, and this exact same question came up where it was like, can you do machine learning? Can you do ML.NET with notebooks? And as you just saw from those demos from Maria, not only can you do ML.NET, but you can also do the data processing with Kusto. You could do the visualization with Sandance, D3, whatever it is that you want. So the short answer to that is yes, you can. And Maria just kind of showed you how you might be able to do that. So cool. That's really awesome. Now, I think that that's really cool, the notebooks, and you and the team, Maria, have been doing a really awesome job with getting that working. But there's also some other projects that you've been involved with. You want to see kind of how you might go about building minimal APIs with VS Code?
I absolutely would love that. Is that what you're going to show me right now?
That is. Yep, that's it. So we're still in development containers, but let's say that now maybe you've used the .NET CLI, or maybe you've used .NET Interactive to go ahead and create your .NET application. So how can you go ahead and debug your apps? How can you go ahead and just step through your code and add on features to it? So going back to the browser here, let's say that I want to go ahead and create a minimal API. If you're not familiar with minimal APIs, there's this way of building web APIs that are super lightweight, super minimal, and allow you to focus and are not so much prescriptive in terms of how you should structure your code. They sort of give you a little bit more freedom in terms of how you structure it and how you build your web applications. When it comes to machine learning, we really like it because typically when you're deploying these machine learning models, the easiest, or I wouldn't say the easiest, but probably the simplest way or the most flexible way of doing that is through web APIs. And because all you need is a single endpoint and you just need to have an input and an output, you don't need a lot to get going, right? So minimal APIs are really, really good for that. So let's say that I want to scaffold a minimal API in here. So I am inside of my code spaces. So again, that full development environment. If I go ahead and use .NET CLI, .NET New, Web API, minimal, I'll call it weather API, minimal, and no HTTPS. Don't try this at home. You definitely want HTTPS. But in this case, I'm gonna do without no HTTPS because why not?
Okay, it's a demo. It's a
go
demo.
crazy, go crazy. Yep. All right, so that's gonna go ahead and scaffold an application for me here, this weather API. And you're gonna see that the only file that's going to be here is this program.cs file. And that's your entire application. That's a whole, let's see, 50, oh, not even 50 lines of code. And you have a web API. Now, this particular web API, all it's going to do is, well, not all, saying it like, so that's it, right? It's only going to go ahead and set up Swagger for you, right? Which is this really nice way of working with the Open API spec to sort of make your APIs discoverable. It's also going to define an endpoint, in this case, weather forecast, which is just going to return a 5-day forecast for you. Okay. So I want to go ahead and test this. First of all, I want to run it. I want to make sure that everything's working. So how can I go about doing that? I can just do something like .NET watch run. And oh, wrong file. This is how you know it's live.
Exactly.
Go ahead, .NET watch run, and what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and launch your application for you. Just awesome, great. Now you're going to see that it's going to tell me your application is running on port 5016. So in addition to the terminal and all of the console outputs that you have here, you have this thing here called ports. Now you're going to see here that port 5016, which is where my application is listening, is actually mapped to some address that I can go ahead and open in the browser, and I'm able to test my application. So it's going to do some things, and it failed, which I expected. This was actually planned, and that's because there's nothing at that home address, right? So if we go to the weather forecast endpoint, we can go ahead and see that. If we go ahead and refresh that, we can see our application. So this is not working locally. This is working in the cloud, testing my application that's also somewhere in the cloud, but making it feel local to me, right? And again, I didn't have to set up this environment at all. I just went ahead and worked just like if I was working locally in the cloud. Okay, cool. So what if I wanted to go ahead and make some edits? I want to make some changes. See, my application's still running. Okay. So what if I wanted to move this Lambda here? Just move it somewhere, do a little bit of copy and paste because I need to do some edits. I want to be able to test this. I want to be able to debug. So I don't know, let's do var get weather forecast is equal to.
Yeah.
It's my, oh yeah, there it is. Okay. Add one of those. And then to this, I'm just going to add get weather forecast. Cool. All right. So I go ahead and save that. Hot reload. Is it working for me? Come on. You can do it. I believe in you. Is it working? No.
Oh, okay. So
it is still working. Yep.
Did it succeed? Yeah, it shows
it didn't fail. Let's try this. So if I were to change this to, let's say that maybe I don't want a 5-day forecast, maybe I just want a 3-day forecast. So in this case, there should be 5 entries. If I go ahead and refresh this, you should only see, there you go. So it was working. So forget the output, it worked. Yeah, so my application kept running. You can see that I'm developing in the cloud. I'm testing my application in the cloud. I made edits, saved all that. And you know, we got this app that's working. So what if we wanted to debug, right? So right now this is great. So, but this assumes that I get it right every time. Hot reload is working a little bit for me because you saw there were some errors, but this assumes that I'm getting it right every time. Maybe I want to debug. Maybe I want to step into my code. So how can I do that? I'm actually going to stop it. I'll be honest. I don't know how to do that with hot reload, but let's pretend that you could do that. I'm sure you can. So folks who work with VS Code often, you know, so I want to go ahead and generate the assets to build in the bug. So this is going to create some sort of configuration that's going to allow me to launch and attach to this application. And let's say that I wanted to add a breakpoint to this forecast here and just hit play here. Now what this is going to do is it's going to restart my application, but now it's going to be with the debugger. So again, very much the same.
Happening in the browser.
On the browser. So this is nothing local. It's all in the browser. Again, 5016, it told me, hey, I'm listening. I'm ready for you to do stuff. And let's go ahead and refresh that. But what we're going to see is nothing's happening because my breakpoint hit. So at this point, I can just go ahead and use the debugger just like I would, you know, in my local environment. You're going to see that the forecast, there's only 3 entries, right? Because I only want to get those 3 days in this case. And continue through it. Looks okay. And voila, that's it. All done.
The first time I've seen like a debug experience in VS Code. Like I always go back to Visual Studio. This is a very like great for learners as they're getting used to all the tools that they need to use to be productive as developers. I love this.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, going back to that sort of that interactive, you know, sort of, you know, experience as well, right? If you did want to debug, if you did want to sort of check out, hey, does this algorithm or does this function work? Or again, if you're just trying to teach a concept, right, that's also a really good experience because you're getting that feedback real time. You're, you know, debugging in a sense real time if your code works or it does what's expected. So regardless of whether you're going through this hot reload, debugger, or you're using the interactive experience, right, you know, you really have an option, and you know, whatever your use case is or scenario, you have options. Right. Yep. Awesome. Yep. So let me see. I think we have maybe 1 or 2 more slides here. Yep. So I'm not even going to go into the full sort of, you know, full screen here. I'm just going to sort of let you folks know that there's actually a lot of sessions happening. I think some may have passed or upcoming, but definitely make sure to check out the testing tools for .NET and Cloud Platform apps. Right, so you want to check that one out. You want to check out the minimal APIs in .NET 6 because right here we just scratched the surface of what those are and sort of a lot of the internals. But this one would really give you, just a little bit more hands-on experience with those, and then also real-world minimal APIs. I know that I've seen some really, really cool and interesting examples of, here we just scaffolded an application and we got it to, sorry. There we go. Yeah, so in this case, we went ahead and we were able to show just a scaffolding application, debugging with the template that's already there. But there are folks that are actually building production-grade applications right out in the real world with minimal API. Wow. So it's not just, a demo app. It's really something that you can use day to day. So with that, I think we still have some time. But if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take some.
Absolutely cool. I think people loved seeing the .NET Interactive aspect and then seeing inside of Dev Container. Lots of buzz. I got a few good questions for you. So this is a good one. So it looks awesome, but honestly, what are the use cases outside for .NET notebooks outside of learning and documentation for ML? What are kind of examples that come to mind for this?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So what we've seen is that .NET developers are using notebooks for various things, from data science to machine learning, not only just for learning. We've also noticed that people are using this as troubleshoot guides. So we have an entire organization within Azure where they have .NET developers who use notebooks to actually troubleshoot their live sites because it gives them live telemetry and it's able to mix and match things. So people are using it as a way to troubleshoot their websites. We're also seeing a trend within the industry where people are looking about how do I put my notebooks into production? How do I help notebooks to help configure my pipelines? So these are all scenarios and real world scenarios that are solving developer problems that people are using notebooks for today.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that I'll add on to that, right, is that you can just check these into source control, right? And GitHub has this really cool way, I don't have it up right now, but in GitHub, you can actually view what the notebooks and their outputs are. So, even if you weren't running the actual notebook, if you did a nice write-up that you can share with someone of, that troubleshooting guide or whatever it may be, showing examples and things like that, that's another really neat way of, using notebooks. It's just sharing information.
Absolutely. I was going to say, they said just documentation. What do you mean just documentation? Besides, that's a full 25%. Come on, we love our documentation.
Okay. Amazing.
I got another one for you. Does SQL Notebooks support Oracle databases? Can you connect there?
Yes. So what we're doing is that right now it doesn't, but we are building our extension model to support multiple database providers. So right now we have samples for SQL, SQLite, Postgres, as well as Azure Cosmos DB. We just haven't got to Oracle, but we're always accepting open contributions. So if people look at our documentation, and we are very proud of our documentation on the .NET Interactive side, and they look up our docs on our repo, we would love a contribution on Oracle, or just open up an issue and I promise I will follow up.